We are the Nonprofits. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Nonprofits. This show is a product of the ACA, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the separation of religion and government and the promotion of positive atheism. Today, our hosts are myself, Malty, JMike from Axioms on Trial, Laura Magee, and the always welcome Johnny P. Angel. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the like, ring that bell, so you'll be notified on our future episodes. You can support us on Patreon if you'd like, if you have the means to do so. That would be at patreon.com/thenonprofits. Feel free to join us at our fan-run social media outlets. You can find us at the Nonprofits, at the ACA Discord at tiny.cc/ACA Discord, on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/nonprofitslive.
Malty's in the middle of a psychic battle with Dormammu right now, so it's
Who is Dormammu?
Doctor
Dormammu
Strange
from-
villain. So yeah, it's all right. Don't judge people out there in the audience. I can't even fight Dormammu in a closed room.
Oh,
It's a
my
mouthful.
goodness. Tell us what you like, what you don't like in the comments. Email us at nonprofits@atheist-community.org. If you are on Amazon, you can use Amazon Smile to help out the ACA a little bit. Doesn't change your price at all. A little bit of money comes to the ACA. And as always, with all the topics on these shows, we will have links in the down below to the articles and subjects that we're talking about. So we've got a very interesting, I'd say, episode for you today. We're going to start with Lil Nas X and his Satan shoes. We also will, from there, we'll be going on and talking about can religion give you PTSD? We have some interesting information coming from Gallup this week, showing that the majority of people are no longer church attenders. And we will end up with a lawsuit brought against the Department of Education by the REAP Foundation in support of LGBTQ students going to religious universities. So to start off, we will be talking about Lil Nas X and MSCHF, the Satan shoes. Laura, can you fill us in a little bit about what's been going on?
Absolutely. Okay, so this has been all over the place. So pretty much everybody, I would assume, knows something about it. But just in case you've been living under a rock, MSCHF is being sued by Nike for a copyright infringement for the Satan shoes. So these are there's 666 pairs of shoes that they designed in collaboration with Lil Nas that feature there's a pentagram and an Bible verse. So it's priced at $1,018, which is a reference to Luke 18, which describes the fall, like Satan's fall from heaven. It's also featuring a drop of human blood that's in the sole of the shoe mixed in with the red paint. So what's really, really significant about this is that last year, MSCHF made a pair of Jesus shoes, and they sold out, and they brought all kinds of good publicity to Nike, and there was no issue over them. Now they've done the opposite and made the Satan shoes, and Nike is bringing the copyright infringement. So lots to talk about here. Yeah. So I don't know who wants to get started on that. But yeah.
Well, I would start out and say that I thought the MSCHF statement that they put, which was, quote, heresy only exists in relation to doctrine. Who is Nike to censor one but not the other, unquote. I failed to come up with any reason why which Nike could substantiate or elucidate on why they would be able to kind of pick and choose that battle there. I can't see a reason at all. I mean, would there be anybody willing to even play the devil's advocate on that? Or what
I will.
You will have two devil's advocates then. Go, you do it, Laura. What do you got?
Okay, so when it comes to copyright infringement, if they use the Nike logo and they didn't have permission to use the Nike logo, there's an issue there, like just period across the board. And now whether or not a company decides I do want to move forward with this lawsuit or I don't is really up to that company. So we can talk a lot about hypocrisy and why this one and not that one. But in terms of the lawsuit itself, I think the bottom line is, did they have permission to use the swish or did they not have permission to use it? And if so, I think if they don't have permission, I think that Nike has a valid argument.
Sure. Didn't the Jesus shoes have the swish though on it as well?
They did.
But companies don't have to sue over copyright infringements if they don't want to. So.
Yeah, just because they didn't the first time doesn't mean that they've waived any right to be able to bring an action later.
But officer, I'm always driving at 75 miles an hour on this road. I've gone past you multiple times.
Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, well, you're right. I guess I got to let you off with a warning this time. Exactly. No, and the reason why they didn't bring the suit before was probably because they got a lot of good press about it. And this is an example of Nike responding to the market, to public opinion, right?
Exactly.
And my thought on this is, well, they can do it if they want to, right? And this is like a temperature gauge of what the culture is willing to accept. Because personally, like Jesus shoes could be seen as very patronizing and very manipulative and very disrespectful, but it wasn't taken that way. And so now, all these instances of brands coming in on one side or the other of major social issues, well, this is Nike coming in on one side. And as atheists, obviously, we might be inclined to fall on the other end of that.
Yeah. It seems like it just bothers me. And yes, the Jesus shoes, I believe I was able to find that there was only 20 pair made, where on this Satan shoes there was 666 pair. But I mean, Drake was wearing those Jesus shoes and has a sub Drake shoe through Nike. I mean, so it in no way hurt them and him because of that. I do wonder how much Nike is shy about boycotts, even though no actual boycott has actually been happened. There's been some pundits that have been kind of fanning the flames of possible boycott, but that does not seem to be going against MSCHF or their production of the shoes, but against Lil Nas X and his video. That's where I'm seeing the Twitter war is going on. Doesn't seem to be having anything to do with the actual piece of art, and that's what I'm wondering. Can you actually purchase a pair of shoes? Aren't they then yours to do whatever you want with? If you've actually bought them, can't you modify them and then sell them as art? Or is that not something that is going to be able to be done now? Can you no longer have a third party reselling of a product after modification, which a lot of these seems like some of these companies are trying to do?
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Well, I think there's a difference between, and I didn't actually say MSCHF out loud. I was saying MSCHF the entire time.
I was too. I did too. So we both are awesome there, Johnny. Great.
It's very, very good, Malty. Yeah. There's a difference between producing. So that's a strange thing. If you're producing art, I mean, found objects can be used as art. The Jasper Johns is an abstract expressionist that used a lot of found objects, mostly like weird stuff like tires and goats and things like that. It's not like Goodyear was suing him for the use of their tires or goat manufacturers over that. But this is a little different because, again, to me, but it's a different because they produce 666 of them. That's a very small niche market, right? But even smaller is 20. I don't know what the law is on that. Where's that line? But it's undeniable. The swoosh is there. And there is, I think, potential for, confusion in the marketplace. Although 666 versus how many shoes does Nike sell? And it was like was it the 97 Max? Is that what the
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it was that style of shoe. Yeah.
Right.
Both the Jesus shoe and the Satan shoe are based off the 97 Max.
Does that mean it's from 1997? It's a 1997 model, or is that just they're hearkening back to some championship accomplishment in 1997?
I think it's a model, but I'm not sure if those are
Okay.
only in production during the year or if they continue production. And I'm not the shoe guy.
Or that's
so
when
I
they were
wouldn't be able to
designed.
tell you.
Because it sounds more like a design than the actual shoe. Like they took the design of that. But I don't know how that works.
Yeah. And Nike was very clear to say they have no relationship with MSCHF or with Lil Nas X. And I say it like that because I don't really know anything about contemporary music of bands that I would necessarily see, occasionally a few here and there, but and I'm certainly not a rapsman. I don't listen to that. Maybe older stuff like the Sugar Hill Gang. But yeah, I think there is potential for some confusion there. I would have felt a lot better if they took the Nike off of it. It seems like it's pushing the boundaries, but that's the whole idea of the shoe.
Well, that's the whole
I
idea
kind of-
behind
Right?
MSCHF.
Yeah,
Okay.
I really questioned why they left it in there to begin with, though, because that wasn't really clear to me. I read a few of the articles, but why that remained on there wasn't made clear to me.
Is there any
Um,
insight into that? Like, why did they leave it on
I
there?
think so. And to answer your question before, the Nike Air Max 97 is Nike's running shoe designed by Christian Treasure. It was inspired by a Japanese style bullet train, and it's been on sale since 2017 for $160.
Oh.
So it's
Okay.
so. To answer your question, well, I'm sorry. I'm blanking on what I was going to answer before I answer.
Why did they choose
Yeah.
to leave the swish on versus just removing it and making it maybe less obvious?
Yeah.
Right.
Clearly,
I
there's
mean,
intent that they, know.
when you look at I was looking at the conversation between MSCHF, one of the members of MSCHF, about the Jesus shoe, and they were saying, "Gosh, I really hope they sue us. That would be great." Was actually the
That's
quote that
right.
I saw.
I remember reading that too.
And so I think what they are trying to do, if I would trying to bring up the response that MSCHF gave to the lawsuit and saying how they want to participate in art. Art is not something that is to be put on whitewashed walls in galleries, but is something to be experienced. It's something that needs to be they really want to be more in a conceptual or
Yeah, I have the quote
active
here if you want me to read it.
participation. Please.
Yeah, it says, "We believe it is better to make art than that participates directly in its subject matter. It is stronger to do a thing than to talk about a thing. MSCHF makes artwork that lives directly in the systems they critique, instead of hiding inside the white-walled galleries." And then they say, "Satan Shoes started a conversation while also living natively in its space. It is art created for people to observe, speculate on, purchase, and own."
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's certainly eliciting a response. And I would disagree that art doesn't exist on white walls of a museum as well. I think it exists in many avenues, but it certainly exists here. And I remember having conversations with non-art aficionados about the nature of art. And I have working artist friends.
Or what counts as art.
What counts? Well, that's not art. That's Gauguin. It's just a bunch of people sitting around the beach. I'm like, well, okay, it's not for you, but it's certainly sparking a conversation here. It's human expression, and I think any form of human expression can ultimately rise to the level of an artistic expression. So it's transgressive pop art, you could say, or commercial art. It's a take on commercialism. And look at all the tears. Look at all the tears and pearls that are being clutched and hands that are being wrung about this. I talked about this with a friend of mine, and one of the things that I thought was funny, quite aside from Nike's claim over their intellectual property, which there's something real there, and there's law that's established on it, is I'm assuming Christians, whatever variety, do they think they own the concept of Satan in some way? Do they feel that they can dictate how Satan goes into the marketplace? Because to me, it's not just the shoes are great, but the video. I watched the video. I watched it twice, and I wanted to see if I missed anything. And then I read some of these commentary about the video and the song and what it's really talking about. And so I'd encourage our viewers to go ahead and watch it if you like that kind of thing. And if you are not very puritanical, it's certainly not my taste in music, but I wouldn't call it rap, actually. It's trap, is it not? Perhaps, is that a more accurate?
I don't know. Whatever video you sent last night, though, about that was a really good video, I thought. That was you that sent that.
Well, and then didn't Lil Nas X also issue a sorry not sorry, like a trolley apology?
Oh, quite a few.
I don't even think not very apologetic.
Yeah. I don't think there was really apology in there.
I really enjoy that.
Well, like his little Twitter war with Governor Kristi Noem, where she's saying our kids are being told that this kind of product is not only okay, but it's exclusive. But you know what's also exclusive? Their God-given eternal soul, and which Nas is responding with, you're a whole governor and you're here tweeting about some damn shoes. Do your job.
Yeah.
Which is a perfect response.
It really, it is. And not that, even when you actually look at like the Satan God thing, it's like, I mean, who comes out on top on that as a more moral or less evil proponent there? That's kind of the thing that sticks to me the most, is how lopsided it seems to be that the backlash is stemmed from this, when it doesn't seem that people's understanding of Satan or really, at least from my perspective, what I would call immoral acts in comparison to the God that they believe in. But that's a whole separate, different issue to go down. So,
but it does make sense, because what you're saying is essentially, and this is one thing that I noted, is that even the journalists talk about these shoes in terms of them being sinister, right? So you hit the nail on the head, because now you're talking about the Jesus shoes as somehow being like pure and okay, and the Satan shoes as being sinister and evil and like diabolical. And I think that they do start that conversation, and they do get people talking and pushing back against that. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Well, the whole aesthetic and the message of the song, I think, is very different. It's about being in love with a man who's in the closet, which is a reality for many people. And it's very painful. I guess to some degree, some people might be into that, but I think it can be very painful for a person to be stuck in a position where there's love that can't be openly requited. But so the song is one thing, the imagery is another, and again, would be really good if we had a guest on the show who could speak specifically to this. But camp is a key feature historically of the LGBTQ image, I guess, in some respects, right? And
I know where you're going on this. Camp, as in it's kind of campy. The imagery is over the top in that way.
Over the top,
provocative,
provocative, extreme positions. Thinking of John Waters, thinking of all the pride parades I've been to over the years, which are just a hell of a lot of fun. All the colors are super bright. People are wearing shoes that should break their ankles. Everyone's feathers and wings and sequins and all kinds of crazy stuff, because it's a contraposition to, in large part, the boxification of a person's personality in a world that wouldn't accept them. Again, this is, and I'll say this, I'm seeing this from the inside out, but I got enough friends, right, So this is campy as shit. Is it 2 minutes in? Can I swear? It is 2 minutes.
You
in.
can, yeah.
And I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
And the whole idea, I put in my notes. You saw it. Maybe it's like, okay, great. Now, middle America, Mike Huckabee types are going to be like, well, gays are Satanists and Satanists are evil. Look at them. I'm like, well, okay, no, that's really stupid, and make the argument. And anyone who's really thinking about it will laugh you out of off your little soapbox.
Yeah.
And that conversation's happening anyway. Whether Lil Nas does this or whether the shoes are made or not, that conversation's already happening. So this just takes that conversation and it puts it in people's faces and it forces them to think about it and look at it.
Oh yeah, how much impact do you think this made? I mean, it's
huge.
Like, and that's one thing is like, it seems to be that in the direction of, I mean, if anything, you kind of reap what you can out of the benefits there for it, because that's probably impacted not one, but thousands, if not millions of people's own issues with that. And like you said, not having that that type of love like reciprocated to you. You now have a figure you can look up to that like that. I mean, that's kind of what I was going to go into later with some of the stuff about why people are leaving the church and stuff. It seems this type of spread with the media we have, that's not really restricted, seems to really help shows like the Atheist Experience or Seth Andrews podcast. Like it creates that, and something on the rap or pop level. I mean, that is really huge for what we all fight and talk about. So
Yeah.
Well, think about, okay, so I'm thinking of Bewitched and Hollywood Squares. Maybe someone can help me on this, but there was a guy and he was freaking great, who was like weird Uncle such and such on Bewitched. Oh, I'm embarrassed that
I don't know.
a buddy of
I was
mine
way too young for that.
A buddy of mine would tear me up for not remembering his name, but he was this very bold for the time gay comedian who was on Bewitched, and he was just always like, well, there's something not quite right about him, right? But he's sassy and he's fun. And then when he got on Hollywood Squares, which was a program in, I think, the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I watched it in the 80s and 90s, where you would play tic-tac-toe and they'd ask a question and somebody would say something funny and you either go with them or go against them. Paul Lynde. Thank you. Paul Lynde.
There we go.
Yeah, Paul Lynde's awesome. Look at his stuff. He pushed the limits of everyone knew Paul Lynde was gay, right? But he didn't come out and say it. At least I don't think he did. And we go further in time. We remember the big scandal of Ellen coming out, right? Mm-hmm. And how there was a big to-do about that. We're so over it. Now this is Paul Lynde on ecstasy, right?
Sort of refreshing
Paul Lynde in the 21st century.
Yeah.
There you go.
And we're gonna get over it.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think there are some people who get a specific idea of someone or something, and that it cannot change. So since Lil Nas was on Sesame Street and has a large young following, just same like Hannah Montana. People grow up. People have to be able to express themselves, artists, of where they're at. And so at one point in time, what he was talking about things to children, maybe not about children, but I mean that was his demographic. But now it's changing, and people need to understand that's going to happen. No matter, it's going to happen again and again.
Yeah, it's always precious when it's going against like some societal norm that they want to protect, right? It seems to be always the case.
What about the children? Well, let me ask you this. Yeah. I mean, okay, so this is crazy and off the top and like quite a spectacle, right? When did Lil Nas X, or whatever his name was at the time, I'm more into the Ink Spots and Dolly Parton, I suppose, than contemporary music. So I feel strange talking about a contemporary musician, but when did he go on Sesame Street and talk about whatever Sesame Street people talk about? Was he in the closet or out? Because I know he came out after he was already famous.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone know? Because I don't.
I didn't even know he was on Sesame Street. Yeah.
Same here.
He's the same guy. And the fact is, we're all into things that we don't share with children.
Mhm.
Laura, you're a parent, right? You have an adult life, and you have your kid life.
Yep. And then what you teach your children about certain topics versus the whole range of information about that topic.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like it's currently. I'm seeing episodes July 2020, January 2021.
Okay.
That's really recently. Okay.
That's very recently. And I assume he came out before then. But again, like there is here's something, and I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot about this. I didn't think I would. I didn't think I had a lot to say about this, but I think I do. Awesome. There is this idea of the default, right? Cis white het male or cis white het female, right? Christian, presumably. And everything else in movies and TV shows and media and books throughout history. Oh, if you depart from that, then you are, like, okay, we got to have a Power Ranger, right? What's her color? Pink. Or if she's Asian, it's yellow or something stupid like that, right? They're defined by the difference, right? In movies, it happens a lot. In games, it happens a lot and stuff like that. And so I'd imagine these pearl clutchers are thinking, oh, he's this like over the top campy gay person. That means that's everything that he's about. He's not, he's a person. He's got to pay his bills. He's got to get food. He's got to do all kinds of stuff. And they can imagine that he would interact with children like a person would interact with children, a person that cares about children or wants to interact in some way for children out there in the audience, that he's going to be wearing, platform shoes and doing lap dances and stuff with children. It's asinine, it's insulting, and it's objectifying people in a way that's, it shows how tiny your little mind is. Yeah. That it doesn't suffer any difference.
But it also shows how they fear the impact that he has, because he does have a potential to have a very positive impact on these children. Like, hey, if you're gay yourself, look at me. Look at, like, I'm going to come right out and say it. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to push against the social norms. And he's more or less empowering young people and children to make their own bold statements, right? And so there's a lot of threat there. When you think of these like pearl clutchers, right? There's a lot of like, oh, he has influence over our children, dear Lord. Right?
Yeah.
So I see that. I don't agree with the fear, but I understand it.
Yeah. One thing that I was interested in the lyrics of the song was the talk about the trauma and the hurt that he's had to go through and how what he's talking about. But unfortunately, we could talk about this for quite some time more, but we need to move on.
Moving on.
Moving on. Speaking of hurt and trauma, we've got an article from the New Republic here. Can religion give you PTSD? Mike, can you give us a little lead in on what this article is about?
Yeah, so it starts out following Anna Sharp Williamson and kind of highlights her deconstruction process as being an evangelical, which goes into like a lot of things about how a lot of these beliefs she held very deeply. Like there's something in there that they talk about, which is complementarianism, which is kind of like this belief that men and women kind of have their respective roles. And so like as a child, that was used to an advantageous for someone victimizing her into like sexual things. And so that seems from her position, at the time to be reinforced by what is deemed to be okay within the doctrine, or I think she even quoted, I have a quote for it, which is a verse in Jeremiah: "The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it?" And she said that the message was, don't listen to your feelings, is how she interpreted that. Which is the thing that I kind of draw upon for that is, if you were to do a Google search right now on like 10 signs you're in a toxic relation, and you can just do this, I mean, you can compare this, and you look at all the things they list, whether it's self depreciation, or whether you're sacrificing yourself for others, whether you're being controlled, anything down the list, you can associate it here with that. The same trauma someone can get from a very real relationship with the person who is very victimizing in that sense. It seems to be this very analogous here. But it strikes me because I was never touched by religion. So going through that for me is always a part that I can't fully put my shoes in, but it's something I can emotionally, or I can empathize with to a degree. I know Johnny, you and Laura, right? You guys kind of came out of that, whereas me and Malty are. What did you refer it as, Malty? Cradle
atheist.
Yeah.
Cradle atheists.
Yeah.
Gold star atheist.
Maybe you could potentially kind of lead that in for how you guys relate to that, as opposed to maybe someone myself that has a very limited scope into that insight.
Laura, why don't you take the lead on this? Because I didn't suffer any religious trauma, I don't think. And I don't know if you did. What was your experience?
So for me, it's really interesting, especially when I read this article. And I had just had a conversation like a few days prior to reading this article that like linked right up in my brain to this. And so I'm going to relay that conversation. So I was raised in a secular household, but from a father who was previously incredibly religious. And so he left the God thing behind, but he had all those values and indoctrination and all those teachings. And so I was raised like in the religion of my father, so to speak. And that traumatized the living daylights out of me. And then, I mean, I'm still struggling with some of that stuff. But when I joined the Christian church as a young adult, I was able to take all those values and all those things he taught me and all those, everything that he told me was bad about me and everything that was like, here's how you have to live your life. And I literally just had to plug God into it. And it all fit, right? Because all he had done was taken the deity out and left all the teachings the same. So yeah, so I can speak a lot on the fear, the self-depreciation, the shame. But it's interesting because it came from my father during a time when he wasn't religious. So it's easy to say, oh, that wasn't religious trauma. Yeah. But it was all the same teachings. Yeah.
Can I piggyback on what you just said? Because this has come up a lot in our comments. And it's come up in sort of the thing that has fueled the nonprofits changes, all right, in the way the show's a little different than it used to be, because it's different people that are running the show, and that's just the way it is. Okay, so we haven't had any theists on the show so far, right? But we have had atheists, and we all exist in a community of other atheists, right, and theists as well, but we don't know what baggage we're carrying from our religious past. Okay. Yeah. A lot of times we'll hear, why are we hearing about LGBTQ issues? Right. Somebody commented and then retracted his comment. Actually, way to go, man. Like, think this through. We're a very diverse community of people all around the world. Men, women, non-binary, gay, straight, other kinds of people, black, white, Latino, Asian, all kinds of stuff. And we just assume that when we put down our cross or our crescent or whatever it is, that suddenly we're red-pilled on life and that we're facts and logic don't care about your faith, but it's not true. There are still some very, let's say this, there are still some
kind of effects of how you think. Yeah.
Well, there are only two genders or whatever. Okay. And when you really boil right down to it, are you trying to find facts or science that supports that position? Are you actually looking at everything skeptically, or are you reinforcing your beliefs? So and I know that's a little off topic, but if you think about that, the atheist community, r/atheism, these chat groups are toxic fucking environments. Yeah. And maybe by having these conversations out amongst friends or respectful people, and we'll have people that we disagree with more as the show goes on. You can learn how to have those conversations,
right?
Where the differences really lie, and maybe reevaluate your own assumptions, because they're there. They're buried in your head, and once you point it out, like, oh my God, I'm just following suit. on what I was taught at First Holy Communion. What the hell's wrong with me? I see it now. And that's a little bit of background why that made me think about it. So I'm sorry
Can
I kind of
No, you're
derailed.
you're
Can I
all
touch
good.
on that?
You're all good.
If you guys have to
Go.
say,
Yeah,
okay.
go
Please,
ahead.
bro.
So that really, really strikes me because we think that all the religious trauma or religious teachings leave with the religion, and they really don't. And so where religion traumatized me even more, where my family upbringing didn't, well, I mean, there's some overlap there, but where it really nailed it home for me was with the whole family structure and marriage thing. And I left religion still thinking I was a bad wife, still thinking I had to do certain things to please my husband, still thinking I had to do certain behaviors to be a good woman, things like submissiveness and
Mhm.
gentle speaking and um, letting the man lead and stuff. And it took years, and it took me going back to college and taking a gender class and stuff like that to let go of some of these things. Even like things about like sex or whether or not masturbation is okay. Like I have 3 teenagers,
Sure.
and what conversations am I having with them about it? And
Mhm.
so just because you let the God thing go doesn't mean you let those values or those beliefs go. And that was a lot of trauma that I brought with me and carried with me. Like I'm still now just learning that I need to resolve some of these things.
So did you have like what she talks about in the article there about the complementarianism that like roles
Yeah,
kind of
it's
between
sort of like a
that?
separate but equal kind of thing.
So
Right.
that was an actual thing coming out of it that you yourself kind of had to wrestle with. Because for
It
me,
was
as someone
something
who's
that
never grown up, it's like a
oh
very
yeah.
very strange thing to hear. That way.
It's
Uh,
something that goes against my nature that I always struggled with and thought I was bad because of that. So yeah, that whole like, well, you're a woman, so this is the better role for you, or this is the more appropriate role for you.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I carried that with me. Like it not that I fulfilled that role, it's that I couldn't fulfill that role. And so I carried a lot of guilt and shame that I
Mhm.
couldn't.
And that's
Yeah.
one of the things that I noticed in. We actually have a few articles on this topic, so please
Mhm.
forgive me if I've skipped to a different article, but they're all related to each other.
Sure.
Right.
One of them was like isolation in a group. One of the quotes here was, I remember one time when I was 9 being in church during a hymn and everyone was singing and raising their hands and closing their eyes. I didn't feel it. This wave of isolation and trepidation came over me. Everyone seemed engaged except for me. I knew I was not like everyone else.
Mhm.
So Laura, when you were in that, and sort of put you on the spot because I think you're
Oh,
the
no
one
worries.
who's actually lived this and maybe still are to some degree. Maybe every so often you find another little thing to brush off. But
It gets
did
better.
you feel, even though you were surrounded and in those communities that you belong to, isolated because those roles didn't fit you?
Absolutely. Yeah. What's weird is when I went from Christianity to Islam, one of the imams I was working with was like, "Why are you struggling so much with your role as a wife?" Like he's like, in Islam, it's balance. Like, right, if the male takes on the feminine roles and the female takes on the male roles, as long as they're balanced, it's okay. It's not as strict. Now, whether or not that's true for all Muslim teachings or just the ones that I was receiving, I'm not going to get into that argument.
Yeah.
But
Sure. Yeah.
that was the teaching that I received, was that it's okay if you're the more outgoing and assertive one and he's the more passive and you make more decisions and he's comfortable with that. There's nothing wrong with that. They could not figure out why I was having such a strong problem with this. And yeah, no, in terms of like sitting in the pews and feeling like, oh, everyone else gets it and I don't. I think I prayed the prayer to Jesus to accept like me and forgive my sins probably like 4 or 5 times because I'm like, I'm not sure it actually worked. Like,
This is like an
like
extra one
how
just in case.
how do you
Forgot
know
a
if I
comma.
was sincere enough the first time? So maybe if I'm sincere enough this time, it'll work. Like, how do you know? Right. So
Yeah.
yeah, there
Yeah.
was definitely that sense of I don't belong. Yeah.
Yeah. All of
Yeah.
these are bringing up the idea that this trauma is real and it needs to be recognized by people that are treating the victims or the people that are looking for treatment for religious trauma. And like this, I have a quote here from the New Republic article. There needs for therapists to understand fundamentalism. In general, people who have not survived an authoritarian fundamentalist indoctrination do not realize what a complete mind rape it really is. So, I mean, that's the thing. I know that I've been in therapy for many years, and I have had more than one therapist. And to finally find a therapist that I can talk to and that does not have these underpinning observations, these underpinning places where they're coming from that they may not see as religious or of the faith, but strikes me so much. And they'll say something and it'll just set me off. And I'm wondering, partially, is it that it's just a lack of understanding?
That they're not understanding someone else's mindset that is not religious. That's what you're saying, right?
Well,
Or that
they're not
they're doing it themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
yeah. The
yeah.
unconscious bias sort of thing, where they don't even know that it's coming into play.
Or in one of these articles, we talked about when somebody talked about some element of religious trauma, the therapist's response was, "Well, they're not reading the Bible right." Right?
Oh,
The no
yeah.
true Scotsman, so the no
Yeah.
true therapist, I guess. I guess that's one of the problems of I guess religious faith when it comes to therapy, because I know that therapists are supposed to, certainly like psychologists or whatever, they go to therapy on their own, right? It's a way to help them keep in line with good health and not overindulge in their clients or patients' feelings. But there needs to be an amount of awareness about how far their own religious belief permeates their thoughts, their practice. And it's hard to expect everyone to get that right. And in one of these articles, they were saying, I would rather have a patient go to a therapist who is a believer, who is trained and knowledgeable in religious trauma, than an atheist one who isn't, because it's a very specific kind of trauma. And the cues, the trigger points, the examples from a person's life are going to be different. And if you're not trained to recognize it, you might go off on a wild goose chase, chasing after one problem or another, and never get at it.
Right.
I would agree with that. With taking a person X from r/atheist as opposed to a religious licensed therapist. Yeah, I would probably. And Johnny, I know you probably definitely agree with me on that example specifically.
Yeah.
But
yes, I would.
But yeah, there was actually something I want to jump into that was, I believe it was in the article about it said about 20% of American evangelicals, or roughly about 8 million people, left the church between 2016 and 2020, coinciding with a specific presidency. So I wanted to kind of get your guys' take on that, especially since I think that leads into our next thing anyway. But I'll kind of get your idea on that.
It really does.
Yeah, it really nicely does. Malty, what do you got? Do you?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Johnny. Well, I was thinking that yeah, I mean, there has been I think it was blatant, the disconnect between the people on the pulpit and the people in the pews, in that the religious leaders were seeing the Trump administration as a means to an end, and we're going along and help supporting the Trump administration, not going against it at all.
Yeah.
Because they were getting their the laws passed, they were getting the judges appointed. But the people in the pews were seeing the philandering person, the lying person, the obviously not a Christian person, the grab them into the JJ person.
Yeah, I think. Okay,
go ahead.
I'll let you finish.
That was my
Oh, cool. Yeah, I think a lot of it too also is like, when you talk about going to a church and you kind of like feel what they believe, and you kind of like you can empathize with it and connect with it. When you have a church that takes such a left turn so quickly, I mean, it wasn't even subtle, right? Like just these drastic left turns into that different sort of discussion and that different mindset. I would imagine that a lot of people wouldn't see it as like, oh, my Christianity is bad. It's, oh no, my church has lost its way. right?
Mhm.
And so I don't. That's kind of how I saw that when I read the 20%. Is I saw that as people were disillusioned by their organizations and how quickly, like, if you're going to get a person to change their mind, you got to take time with them and you've got to convince them and talk to them about it. If you're just going to do a left turn like that, there's that certain percentage that you're just going to lose, right? So
Sure.
that's kind of
Yeah.
how I took that.
Well, JMike, you went the opposite direction that I wanted to go, talking about the next topic. I want to go back
Sure.
because it's directly related. I want to quote Lil Nas X.
Oh, we're going back.
Yeah,
We're just
we're
bouncing
going
all over the
back.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all the clipping
So-
that's going on right now.
Go ahead. Your quote of Lil Nas X.
He says this: I spent my entire teenage years hating myself because of the shit y'all preached would happen to me because I was gay. So I hope you're mad. Stay mad. Feel the same anger you teach us to have towards ourselves. That's religious trauma. He's working through it. Obviously, he's a millionaire, but that's still there. Who knows how
powerful.
else?
I think
Yeah,
he's
it
using
is.
it. Yeah.
That's powerful.
He's using it.
Yeah, he's using
And
it. Yeah.
and so there's lots of people though that are not able to use it. They internalize it, and it manifests itself in very strange ways. Well, maybe not strange ways, but very unexpected ways. So another one, if I may, I don't mean
No, that
to.
what you
Please.
said there was very. I was glad you said that. That was very, very powerful. So yeah.
In the Atlantic article that we went to, this was, I think, Daryl Ray. Quote, when you were 5 years old and learning English, you never stopped to ask your parents why you weren't learning German, said Ray, who uses cognitive behavioral therapy to decatastrophize the concept of hell for clients. You just learn it. The same is often true of religion. When you're taught about hell and eternal damnation at ages 4 through 7, these strong concepts are not going to leave you, just like it's hard to unlearn English. It's hard to unlearn the concept of hell. So that was actually very interesting because I learned about hell, but I was never concerned about it. But if I had belonged to a church where hell was like a key concept to everything you did every day,
Yeah.
it's
It's part of
going
your
to-
reality.
it's going to bleed into everything. And
Yeah.
so it's no wonder that you would have trauma because of the nightmares or the threats or the self-loathing for not meeting the standards that are set up. And then even when you leave it, doesn't just go away.
Yeah, I've had so many
Yeah.
people come to me and say, Mike, I'm an atheist now. I'm very, I'm very much out of the religion part. But I wake up like sweating at night, still having the fear of hell, and that's something I can never really like relate to or be able to feel like I give good advice for, because I've never had that fear. But
Right.
hearing that example of it, I mean, that's I feel like a way for me on the outside to kind of peek inward on that, to the smallest level I can. But yeah, that's always like the hardest thing is like it's like I can talk to you about this stuff with religion and all that stuff, but it's like I can never serve that notion to help somebody with their trauma, because it's like, I mean, how do I relate to something? I'd have to just try and pretend, so.
Or you could understand where it comes from. So like
Yeah.
with the trauma and the health thing, you're talking about neural pathways that are built and rebuilt and reinforced and added to, and you don't just snap your fingers and go like, I'm going to break that neural pathway. You have to
Yeah.
replace it with something else. You have to wait for it to break down. You have to work on it. It takes determination. It takes being aware of what you're doing and being aware of your thoughts, and it's really difficult. So just being aware of the process of deprogramming anything in your brain, even if it's a bad habit like smoking or eating an unhealthy food or whatever,
Yeah.
understanding what is going on with the neurology of your brain, I think that is where you will find that you can empathize with people. It's like, I haven't been through it, but I understand that it's a difficult process to reverse, and that's where you can reach them.
Sure.
Yeah, Laura, it's you may not be able to empathize, but we can all sympathize, definitely.
And
Sure.
and a good way to be of assistance is knowing perhaps resources, right?
Yeah.
Good to have the suicide hotline on your phone in case you run into somebody, you encounter a friend. Good to know that recovering from religion exists. I mean, I'm not saying having like an emergency toolkit for every contingency, but we got We got the internet here on our little phones, and being ready to know that there are people who specialize in this area of trauma.
More and more, and I'm happy to see it.
Yeah.
It is a, and hopefully, I'm sorry, we're going to be moving on to our next segment, but hopefully this trauma might be less of an issue in going forward, because Gallup just released a poll showing that U.S. church membership has now fallen below 50% within the U.S. So that doesn't mean that they're not religious. They're just not going to, or people are saying that they are not directly associated with a specific church or a specific religion.
Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen. Oh man, I am so. Yeah. Some of the so this is from Gallup. Please read the article and the associated articles as well. In the down below there, some of the very interesting things that I think is that the rate of decline in church membership is increasing. That is across the board, far as age groups go. Everybody seems to be, you would think that the older people, they stay in the church, and if that church or those church systems are no longer socially relevant to the younger generation, they'll find the new place to go, the new place that is serving their needs for a community. And it's looking more and more like those needs are being met outside the church. So when you see a changes from 1998 to 2000, the traditionalists older than the baby boomers have a 11% decline. Baby boomers have a 9% decline. Generation Xers has a 12% decline. And the millennials, well, we can't get that data because they weren't around in 98. But so, yeah, I'm looking at these trend lines, and it's very happy to see what's going on here.
Yeah, it was, I think I have on here, is a percentage of Americans who don't identify with any religion has grown from 8% in 1998 to 2000 to 13% in 2008 to 2010 and 21% over the past 3 years. And it says, as would be expected, Americans without a religious preference are highly unlikely to belong to a church, synagogue, mosque, or although small proportion, 4% 2018 to 20 data say they do. That figure is down 10% between 1998 and 2000. I believe that was from the same article that you had, if not the ones that we had listed there.
I think it was. There was two different sets of data that we're talking about, and it's kind of good to. So the first set of data is church attendance, like people are just not going to church anymore. Then the second set of data is people who don't affiliate with a specific, whether it's Methodist or Lutheran or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I went through a lot of thoughts on this, because to me, is this a function of people becoming more skeptical about these claims? Is it people reacting to hypocrisy and child rape or egregious political positions they don't agree with? Or is it just simple laziness? Are there just too many things that they'd rather do on a Sunday or a Wednesday or whatever day of the week that you choose to go to gather together to worship Sky Man, like sleeping in, like catching up on your fantasy football, catching up on your Talk Heathen Nonprofits and Atheist Community or AXP programming.
Nice plug.
Yeah, doing nothing. I have always talking about my friend. Hope he's not watching, but he told me that he doesn't even go to church, and his church is gathering virtually. And what he told me was, Pope said is a special dispensation. I don't have to go. Special dispensation. Is an excuse.
No guilt, no obligation to go. Eagles don't go.
But the Lifeway article that we talked about, links in the description, was approaching this decline in church attendance as a catastrophe that needs to be avoided, right? And I loved it. And here's some little tidbits, and might give you an impression of where I'm going with this. Among all adults who attended church regularly, at least 1 year as a teenager, almost half, 45%, currently attend at least twice a month, including more than a quarter, 27%, who attend once a week or more. Another 8% say they attend once a month, while 25% say they attend a few times a year. 22% of those who attend regularly at least 1 year as a teenager now say they do not currently attend at all. So they made the connection that the key to keeping them into adulthood is making sure that they go as often as they can
when they're young.
as a teenager.
Yeah.
They know that you leave and suddenly the veil maybe be lifted. Like, why do I go to that place? It's boring. It's hot or cold. It's the same old thing over and over again. And it's like, if people break the habit, well, first of all, it's a habit, isn't it? You
Yeah.
go
I was
because
going to
you
say the teenage years are formative years. Those are the years where you're establishing yourself and who you are. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So as
If I
we
had-
see as we see young people not going,
Yeah.
is it like a cascade effect where now
Mhm.
fewer people are going into adulthood?
Sure.
And it's got to be multiple things, right? Like, so I had the exact same questions that I was going to bring up too, is like, what are the correlations that we can draw here? What conclusions can we draw from the fact that people aren't going as often? And one thing in relation to the whole teen thing was like the older people who are now leaving church, who have been going their entire lives, and now they're going less and less.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm interested to know if there's any other data out there that talks about these correlations, like polls that show the reasons why people aren't going as often. Because I think that that's something that, from a secular perspective, that we can kind of pick up on and use, like to kind of as a platform, or something that we could use even with growing our own communities. Like, what is it that makes somebody leave a community?
I think there's like a huge difference too in like how things are. Like, when I was a kid, you pretty much got all your media through your cable provider.
Mhm.
No YouTube, stuff like that. I think there's something to be said about looking at like even just like the atheist experience or other YouTube channels that have massive amount of following, Cosmic Skeptic or whoever it might be, right? We have so many of these different people. You can base that on just looking at the audience of them, but then think about how many of those people go out and talk to their religious families, right? And how much that just exponentially grows. And I'm not saying that's like the clear result of it, but it does seem that the way how media is not as restricted, it's more accessible. Of course, we have to counter that with things like false information from certain groups of people that
Right.
just spread it like wildfire. So you kind of have this counter effect to it. But it does seem that a lot of the people I know that I talk to who aren't as into the conversation, but they'll call themselves an atheist or they came out of it, it's predominantly the time that they're said, yeah, I came across this show called The Atheist Experience, or I came across Seth Andrews' podcast, or I came
Right.
across Christopher Hitchens' debates. Like, it's always something that was accessible to them, in their pocket, or something that was very, very close to them. So I wonder how much of a role that's played into people actually making a conscious decision, and not just, hey, I'm not going to affiliate myself with it because I don't go to church, but more so that direct kind of line to that.
Aren't
Not-
you? Go ahead, Laura.
No, I was gonna say not only that, but like to add to the social media thing is like one of you had mentioned the hypocrisy thing. So social media, in addition to being a teaching aid, because I do think that education does have a correlation to whether or not somebody is religious or not, trend wise, generalizing,
Sure.
But being exposed to the different hypocrisies and the different like the corruptions in the church on
Yeah.
social media, like what impact does that have on people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, JMike, we talked before, and I think I saw you on Talk Heathen talking about it.
Mhm.
How you are on the TikTok, aren't you?
Yeah,
On the
I keep it on the low, but yeah, there's a huge, massive audience there, so it's a
Yeah.
very good place to combat these types of things. Yeah,
because preacher men and preacher ladies and let's be frank, preacher men and preacher ladies, period, are on TikTok, are on Facebook, are on Instagram, making their case for theism.
Yeah.
And what I see as I pitter patter around YouTube, not so much the TikTok, is it's never like middle of the road, boring religion, like Midwestern Catholicism. It's never Episcopalians, going in their gray suits and doing whatever they do, those Episcopalians. It's always firebrand people or people.
It's evangelism. Yeah.
Purity culture. So it's very extremes. And I would much rather see these TikTok teens and Facebook people and whatever going into a mild, if not boring, liberal progressive religion, because that exists in greater numbers than to try to pick out those key individuals who go straight into atheism.
Sure.
Because maybe a few generations before they're like, well, why do I even need this thing? I do just fine without all this crap.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And
those videos, they get a lot of views.
Good. You're talking about the
I'm talking about the
religious
evangelical ones. They get like you'll look at the like
yeah.
you'll look at the like counts and it'll say like 900,000 likes. And you're like, how many views are there on this video? Like what? And then I do a video in response and I'll get like 1,000, which seems good, but when you compare the numbers, like not doing that that much damage.
Well, and are they required to watch it because somebody in their school or church is making them do it?
Very good point.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there bots involved? I don't want to say there are bots involved, but
click farms, whatever.
Nothing draws a crowd like a crowd also.
Right.
So,
and then it gets prioritized higher up on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very
true.
You have very solid insight there, because that could be being used to their advantage for sure in some ways, because it seems like the numbers just don't add up.
So that is a good. Oh, I've been talking a lot. You go ahead, Malty.
Well, I was going to bring in the COVID and the social distancing, and how that has played a role in the ability for minds to not have that weekly reinforcement of the church experience, or at least a diluted form, where you don't have that social pressure of, like you were talking about, the kid that was not getting it when everybody was feeling the spirit, right? And all of those people that are no longer feeling the spirit, and they realize that the neighbor is a good person to go talk to, and to share a meal with, or that there are people that you can go volunteer with in this time of crisis that are actually doing good, and they're not necessarily religious. So
that's exactly right. Like, you don't need to get all of your food from one restaurant. I don't know. This also reminds me, this is a deep cut. Everyone says, oh, I'm tired of all these Star Trek, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine references.
Here he goes.
I got one for you. Okay.
I love TNG, so give it to me.
Yeah,
as
Trek
do I,
right
as
here.
do I.
Yeah.
There was a show on BBC called Blake's 7.
Mm-hmm.
You know it, Malty?
Oh yeah.
All right.
A little bit before my time, but yeah.
Mine too. And I would rather watch Blake 7 and Doctor Who than go play basketball, but that's another story altogether. I was forced to play basketball for good reasons. Anyway, Blake 7. And they go to this planet in like the second episode. And on the planet, they go down there, and the leader of the planet tells everyone on the planet, and he's played by, I think it's Brian Blessed. I might be wrong about that, but he's awesome. If it was Brian Blessed, I might just be rewriting my memory. And you have to, I'm going to do a Brian Blessed imitation. You have to take this nutrient, this drug that I give you, to counteract the poisonous effects of the atmosphere. So you're stuck here forever, Blake. And it turns out that it was a sham. And they found this out because I think they get the drug or something like that. And then no one had the drug for a period of time and no one died from it. And that's the opposite of what you're saying, Malty, is that you can get good feelings other places, but you can also not get bad feelings when you don't go. Like, I feel exactly like I did when I went to church, and I've got a Sunday to just dick around. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I don't feel ashamed for being me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe this isn't quite what we want with people are turning away because of counter apologetics being so effective, or because it just doesn't make sense in some other way. But maybe it's exposure to the other world that they were hiding themselves from, and they broke a bad habit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Maybe. All right. So our last segment here, Johnny. I think you are most apt to take the lead on this one.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Well, it has
With
to
what
do
you've
with
been
law.
spitting
So,
so far, I'm excited to see now.
yes,
Well, this is where he
please.
really turns it up. Watch
Yeah,
this.
Let us
yeah,
know.
yeah.
What's
This is
going
the-
on
This is
here?
the one that is the most juicy, for sure.
This is really interesting stuff, and I was happy to read it. I looked at was this LGBTQ Nation article. Really gets into it, so check that out. Links are going to be down there. All the links are going to be down there, but that's the one that I found most informative. And what's happening? This is an article by Alex Bollinger, April 1st, 2021. But it's not an April Fool's joke. LGBTQ students at Christian colleges file class action lawsuits to stop religious exemptions. Religious colleges, according to the law, can discriminate against LGBTQ folks and still receive federal funds because of a religious exemption. These students say that that's resulted in expulsion from those colleges, fines, humiliation, and conversion therapy. So, scumbag schools. The lawsuit is brought by 33 LGBTQ students who attended universities and colleges. They filed a class action lawsuit against the Department of Education, saying that giving religious exemptions to colleges so that they can discriminate against LGBTQ students resulted in, like I said, harassment, conversion therapy, expulsion, and humiliation. Danielle Powell is one of the plaintiffs. She attended Grace University in Louisiana. She's pansexual, and in her senior year, she had feelings for another woman at the school, and she came out. And she said that that the school put her through a disciplinary process, punished, humiliated her, and ultimately expelled her. But that wasn't enough. Grace University demanded that she reimburse the school for thousands of dollars she had already received in scholarship funds.
Who's federally funded, by the way.
Federally funded by us, right?
Yeah.
By us.
Grace University receives federal funds like most colleges in the U.S., but the federal government isn't doing anything about their actions because of Title IX, a law that bans discrimination based on sex and therefore bans anti-LGBTQ discrimination in educational programs. That law has a big religious exemption. Many colleges and universities can openly discriminate against LGBTQ folks because an educational institution which is controlled by a religious organization, all kinds of quotation marks, can discriminate if the ban on discrimination based on sex would, quote, not be consistent with the religious tenets of such an organization. So that's nice and convenient, a nice way to get around it. Again, it's a special carve out for religious organizations. So I say let them discriminate, but cut back all their federal funding. Discriminate all you want.
I would almost agree. Oh, go ahead. Finish.
No, please. You would almost agree, but
But one of the articles, and I can't remember which one, had said that a lot of the times these children go to these schools either not knowing what their sexuality is or not admitting to it yet, or because their parents are funding them to go to these schools, or there's a lot of social pressure from their family or parents to go to these schools. So what bothers me is, like, even pulling back federal funding, you still have these at-risk youth that are being put into these situations where these things are happening to them, and the churches are still given permission to do those things.
the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit, very great point, Elizabeth Hunter, she was put in the foster care system at 10, and she was placed with a family, and they were fundamentalists. They were part of a cult in Texas. Yeehaw. Her parents didn't want her to attend college because she's a woman, because, reasons. but she applied to Bob Jones University because she thought it was one of the few schools she could attend without getting disowned. It's exactly what you're talking about, Laura. She's
Right.
like, there's a small, narrow window where I can get away. And I believe that there are other people in the ACA community who have a very similar story. But thankfully, they found their way out. Well, anyway, Hunter, in her junior year, this is great. I love this. I don't. She posted online about a book that she was reading that had a lesbian character. And she was summoned to a meeting with administrators and told, quote, she must be gay. So I guess.
Not even asked, just told. Yeah.
Well, I must be gay too, because I read In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust, and there's all kinds of gay people in there. And I've posted online about it because, you want to brag when you've read that book. They told her to disavow same-sex relationships, and when she refused, she was put on disciplinary probation, forced to pay a fine, and forced to undergo therapy. Wonderful, wonderful people. There's more. Would you like to hear more, or do we have any thoughts? Because I can keep going on this one.
I mean,
it's the therapy
feelings?
part that I don't know how that was like any. That's on the just prima facie, just very problematic. I don't see how that can even be allowed to have these like conversion therapies, or even mandate that you would do such in order to, I guess, what would be the ultimatum to stay associated with the school, or to have your education.
Right. In order to continue at the college, you would have to go through this
Not be
therapy,
expelled,
and
so in order to like for the sake, I mean, and what an anchor to pull on someone. It's like, hey, I mean, there's that box outside, but basically, like, play by our rules, be who we want you to be, and you'll further your education, and that box outside you won't have to sleep in. It's like that. What a horrible way to anchor
desperate.
That, but,
It's so desperate, isn't it? It's like we're so confident in our ability to that we're preaching the truth, right? Or that we're educating people in the truth with all kinds of T's in that capital T, that you have to ignore who you are, right? We can't have one gay person graduate from our school because, Jesus never hung out with sinners or tax collectors or prostitutes or any of that stuff. He only hung out with the very best.
With cis white guys.
Yeah. All white blonde dudes living in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So this is interesting. So that she attended Bob Jones University highlights the limits of religious exemptions under the law. And this is where I'd be really interested to see where this case goes. In the 1970s, the IRS took away Bob Jones University's tax-exempt status because they banned interracial dating, probably for religious reasons too. The school argued to the Supreme Court that the IRS was violating its religious freedom because it had a sincerely held religious belief against religious dating. In the 1983 decision, Bob Jones University versus the United States, the Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment did not give BJU the right to have a racist policy and get money from the government in the form of a tax-exempt status. The Supreme Court specified that their decision is applicable only with religious schools, not with churches or other purely religious organizations or institutions. So I'll say this. We're going to put it in the notes below, but that decision is available at www.oyez.org or Oye. There's two ways to pronounce it, and there's no concurrence. So check that out, along with, I think, all or most of all Supreme Court arguments that you were ever curious about. So check it out there. We'll also attach the lawsuit below, and you can read the petition or the complaint, for yourself and see what is being argued there.
Yeah, where's the humanity nested within taking a loophole to where you don't have to protect the group of people that attend your institution? Like, it's crazy to me that they it's like, hey, we can just nest our bigotry right into. You said it's Title IX, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just nest your bigotry right in there. I mean, to go in there and to see that. I mean, how joyful do you think the first people to implement that and to go, hey, there's a preventative measure to have to prevent gay kids and trans people to come into our school. It's like, I mean, you have to really be some sort of evil, and from my perspective, to really even to hide behind that legislation like that.
I don't know. I get the religious organizations hiding behind it. Like I disagree again, but I kind of understand the mentality. What I really don't get is the government
yeah.
oversight. Yeah.
Mhm.
So in my opinion, it's like, look, if you've already determined that this is a human rights and a civil rights issue for
Mhm.
everybody else and every other organization, how dare you not see it as a civil rights issue
Sure.
for this
Yeah.
one particular organization?
Yeah.
So
Period.
Johnny, yeah, I want to ask. So the plaintiffs, and I'm going to read here. Plaintiffs asked the court to declare that the religious exemption to Title IX, as applied to sexual and gender minority students, is unconstitutional,
Mhm.
and that the department must enforce the protections because these are taxpayer funded educational institutions. Do you think they have a leg to stand on?
Maybe under a different Supreme Court, they might have had a better leg to stand on.
Wow. Yeah.
That really
But
sucks.
I don't know. It's interesting. We've seen some interesting opinions come out recently that extend LGBTQ rights to, I'll say gender protections to LGBTQ people. So who knows? It's possible, and
Yeah.
and not just the law itself, but there's also ways to loosen this up a bit and tighten it up again to allow less or more discrimination. And one of the things that I found in here was it used to be, well, Trump made it worse.
Yeah.
Right. You saw that. It's like Trump made it worse. Before, schools had to apply for the exemption. I guess they had to meet some kind of a test of some kind. But now, after Guy, they don't have to. And they don't have to be associated with a religious organization. They just have to claim that they're influenced by sincerely held religious beliefs and show minimal proof, like maybe something on their website of those beliefs. So that's probably going to change under Biden, right?
Okay.
But again, I don't like these things being, subject to the ebb and flow of political forces, right? I mean, is it any better that a Supreme Court is the entity that would make the ruling? Shouldn't this come from a ground swelling of the populace? If the numbers keep changing, as we saw
Yeah.
before about church attendance and the nuns growing as they are, it could be by the time before we die, assuming we live a good long life, we might see this change. I just don't. I've heard an argument why churches and religious organizations have tax exempt status, and the argument is always falls through. It's because they do a lot of good work. That's the
I do a lot
argument.
of good work. Like a lot of people do a lot of good work. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
You can have a tax exempt status
Yeah.
when I'm hegemon of the
That's
universe.
However, unless you are a religious organization, you will need to open your books. If you're a
Yeah.
religious
Right,
organization,
right.
you won't have to.
Yeah.
And then we're not talking about churches or other religious institutions in this specific case. We are talking about institutions of education, and that's so whether or not a church can have some taxpayer money and be have bigoted views or actions is something different than having a an educational institution. That's definitely true. Yeah. Anything else from you guys on this?
No.
Well, I think we Laura really hit it on the head. Hit it on the head. Hit the
Hit the
nail
nail
on the
on the
head.
head.
Hit the nail on the head.
Is there a nail here? Laura said it well
Yeah,
when she
did
said
something right.
he did something really great, and I just want to highlight this, if I might.
Oh,
That
you may.
when people when these TikTok teens, as they grow up, they go to college. I mean, shoot, I went to college and I was a theology major, right?
Really?
Yeah, comparative religions kind of a thing. And I got a few courses in before I was like, this is not for me. I then switched over to philosophy. And you don't know, not everyone knows exactly who they are or what they're going to do when they grow up, when they're 17 years old and they're taking the, what is it, the SAT, ACT, whatever it might be, and they go to a college because they think they want to study something, and then they study a little bit about it and they hate it, right? And that's just a study. That's intellectual curiosity or a passion in life. Not everyone enjoys having a fixed passion in life. Now, imagine that you've got these youths who are going to college. Maybe it's the only avenue of college that they have because they don't fit the standard for college material because of their upbringing. And like we saw, they went to the one school they could go to. It was a way for them to get out. And they're already bucking the system by going to college and finding that narrow avenue out. And there's real consequences here. The Chandler Horning is the last of the article. A gay man who attended BYU, Idaho, which bans same-sex relationships, is another plaintiff. And he said that when he was out when he was doing online classes at the school, but when he attended in person, he had to go back into the closet because he was worried about being outed and then expelled. He was especially worried about student housing because students who are expelled, this is wonderful. This is that charity that you get with these religious organizations. I think some of them are probably better than others, but they get 3 days to leave campus housing upon expulsion. So that meant, quote, losing my housing would have left me homeless in rural Idaho.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What time of the year, right? I'm sure that's a factor too.
Oh
And
my gosh, yeah.
and he's outed. I'm sure they would try to contact the family. So Horning could potentially have no options, right? Family won't take him in. He's a college kid, for God's sakes, right? Some of them have the wherewithal to have some money saved. Some of them don't. So there's real consequences, life or death consequences for some people.
Yeah. Well, and that
and
ties in with what we were saying above with the religious trauma. Like,
Yeah.
this is just one more example.
Yeah. So you can read about each one of the 33 plaintiffs at the 33 colleges that they're attending, and their personal stories at thereap.org. We have a link to that in the down below.
Yeah, I like how they had that listed on that site with everybody there. It's a lot more having a face to it and things like that. When you hear these stories, is a lot more. It's not that
Makes
it
it
should
real.
Be, but it just makes it that much more real off the page. You know?
Makes it definitely impactful. Gives a personal face to it.
Yeah.
But Johnny, Laura, Mike, thank you very much for joining me for this episode of the Nonprofits.
Thank you guys for having me. I really am very humble to be on any show that I'm offered on, but especially amongst you guys is very awesome for me. So thank you.
You're
Great
welcome.
To have you.
Great to have you. So, Mike, where other than the Nonprofits can we find you?
Yeah. So I do a channel called Axioms on Trial. I co-host with a buddy of mine who goes by Cease to Know. We talk with astrophysicists, people who have PhDs in New Testament studies. Sometimes it's just us. Sometimes it's people with no credentials. Really, anything goes. We kind of put ourselves out there to have discussions with the opposition, people that hold similar beliefs, whatever it might be. Tomorrow we're doing an episode, or I guess it will be already aired at this point, but there'll be an episode where we discuss with an astrophysicist about the Kalam, which will be pretty interesting.
That'll
We've
be a
done
good
part one on
one.
that. Yeah, we did part one on that, and it was the first time we heard it, and it was very interesting. And then we'll do a little part two now that he's kind of dived into those things. So if you like that nerdy type of stuff, go there.
So that'll premiere on the 8th.
We premiere on the 8th. Yeah.
Okay. Great, Laura. What are you up to? Where can we find you?
Most of my work right now is doing the podcast that I just recently started called Skeptic Hangout with Richard Gilliver and Richard Gill. So that's where I'm putting most of my energy. I do still have Unapologetically Me, and I am still working on that, but I'm not putting out episodes as much because I find this podcast to just be more in line with what I originally wanted. So that's where I'm putting a lot of my energy right now.
Oh, very
Oh,
cool.
and I'll
very
be
cool.
on The Perspective with Ethan Michael on April 20th.
Nice. Ethan's awesome.
He is super cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's up, Johnny? Between you flying, jet setting back and forth between California and Texas,
For
what are
work.
you up to? For work.
For work. Not for pleasure. And with 2 masks, by the way.
Yep.
Work. Helping run this show. And, call screening for Talk Heathen, mostly. I did Secular Sexuality last week, which was a lot of fun. Always is.
Oh.
So hopefully you'll see me there. If you didn't, go check it out. But working with you, Malty, and Laura to make this show fun
Loving
to
it.
watch and be involved in.
Yeah, thank you very much. You put a lot of effort, and truthfully, with you and Ben, this show wouldn't be going on without all the effort that you guys put in, and everybody else. Shout out to the crew, of course, Jason and
Thank you, crew.
and Greg for allowing this and helping this actually become a thing.
Malty was humble there because he didn't say all the work that he does. He does an awful lot of work behind the scenes, making this show happen. So I'll say it for him so that he can be, he can blush or something.
I'm not gonna be blowing my own
Thank you,
horn.
Malty.
You're welcome. Happy to do it.
Yes, it's very
Happy to do it. All right, cool. So again, you can find us on the Discord at tiny.cc/ACA Discord. You can find us on Facebook at Nonprofits Live, Patreon, Smile. Email us at nonprofits@atheist-community.org. Am I missing anything on all of those? What else do we got?
I don't know. Join us in the live chat. Say hello to us. We're gonna be there. Leave comments. Like I said, you do anyway. But leave comments. We like to read them, and then we chat about them and give us new ideas of stuff that we'd like to address on the show.
Yeah, I have seen some emails coming in with helpful comments. So please keep those coming in. It's good to see that we're actually reaching people and they're liking what we do. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and good night to all of you and to all of you. Thanks.
Good night.